We're looking for a man named Bill Crabtree. Do you know him?
As far as I know, he left a few months back, but his wife lives over the other side of town.
Can you show us where?
Yeah, you ride straight through there, up through the town there to the left there.
No. You come with us and show us.
I can't. My wife is waiting for me.
Climb on up here and take us there.
I said I can't.
How about if we come in there and we ask your wife to show us where he lives? Climb up, son. Don't make me ask you again.
Mrs. Crabtree, I'm sorry, but these men...
Where's Bill?
He's not here.
Where did he go?
I don't know.
Sure?
He's not here. I swear. You won't find him here. He up and left us. We haven't seen him in over a year. What do you want Bill for?
Bill's got a price on his head. Killed a guard, and an old man, too. Your daddy's a bank robber.
No, that can't be. And Bill's no killer.
He's been traveling with a half-breed Indian named Cherokee Thompson.
No, it can't be.
No. It be, Miss Crabtree, it be. Sometimes I think the whole world is strung together by lies. But I'm not gonna lie to you, ma'am. I'm gonna kill your husband. I'm gonna get up real close. And if I get a good shot, I'm gonna blow his head clean off.
Why didn't you bloody stop them?
They're stuck in the car all day.
We don't live here anymore. We don't live here.
We don't live here. No, when they're selling it.
You can buy it.
It's too dear, hon. I told you. We're finding another house. Come on.
Why don't we live in this house?
Oh, I told you, Alfie. I told you. The landlord's selling it. Mr. Gaffney, do you remember him?
Yeah.
It's his house, and he wants to sell it.
But why is it his?
It's just his. He owns it. Alfie.
Are you back, Rosie?
Hiya, Bessie. No, we were passing. Just thought I'd check to see if there's any post.
Oh, grand. Loads of people have been in, looking at the house. All sorts.
Yeah.
How's your new place in anyway?
Grand, yeah. Takes a bit of getting used to, you know. Alfie!
There's Millie. Do you like your new house, Pat?
She loves it, don't you, hon? Come on, let's catch Alfie. I'll see you, Betty. Alfie? Alfie! Alfie, come on, love, we have to go.
Hey, Mom.
I know, love, we have to go now, come on.
Go where?
We have to go, love. Come on.
No.
We have to go to find somewhere to stay for tonight, please, come on.
Here.
No, we can't stay here.
I want to stay here.
Please, love, come on.
I'm just playing, Mom.
Alfie, please, Alfie, come on. Please, love, come on. Come on now, enough messing now, enough.
I'm not messing.
Come on, your daddy's waiting outside, we have to go.
I want to play.
I know, look, but we don't have time for this. Alfie, come on.
No,
Yes.
stop.
Come on. Okay, that's enough. Come on.
Stop.
Alfie, please, look. Stop kicking me.
Stop it.
Come on.
No.
Please. Come on. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. Come on. Sorry, look. I'm sorry. Please, let go. Let go. I'm sorry. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
into the car, love. Go with Katie, son. All right.
I told you should have packed it. Dismantled it.
What?
The trampoline!
And where was I supposed to put it? In the car? Darren's place?
Yeah.
Stop it, Rosie.
Jesus, John Paul.
Ken bochyn is zelfs dood.
Oh, Monjarki. En dan maak me even. Betsy Kelly.
Deserter.
Nur scéirlín fútsa. Nuair bhí tú sa gabhlach, gur thaithn an fuil leat.
A lot of your tenants have been struggling, sir. There's already been some cases of starvation.
Nonsense. Crops have failed before and mortality levels have been perfectly acceptable.
Tasula dia am naruk tulon runno sosik mahaksa.
They will not be singing songs about Patsy.
Ketajantat. Chatauchon.
You're gonna tell me what you did?
We should know with the noch te komen.
Munt u die omleg al velen?
Kif hála sa sagan?
You're harless or something. Shall I didn't know sure.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Gareth O'Brien. I'm the head of film and television at the Irish Film and Television Academy, IFTA, and I'd like to welcome you today to our panel, Cinematography, Excellence in the Craft, as part of our IFTA Skills and Focus series in association with Screen Skills Ireland. We're delighted to welcome a great panel today and a great moderator, and you guys as well. Thank you all for showing so much interest in this. Recently, IFTA did 26 screen discussions, so we're all kind of getting used to doing things like this online, I think. And we're delighted to bring you a new series of Skills in Focus. This one is cinematography, and in the coming week or two, we're going to also do documentary and first feature directing. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We're going to run for about 90 minutes today. Those of you viewing at home, you can you can ask questions throughout the session. So there's a little Q&A button at the bottom or top of your screen, depending what format you're using, be it a phone, a laptop, machine, or tablet. We sent you out a clips package, a link to that, which has work from all our wonderful panelists. We sent that out to you yesterday and again this morning, and we'll have that in the chat bar at the bottom if you want to review it at any point or have a look at that. If you do have questions, please do send them in. Ian will do his best to get to them during the session if they're relevant to what we're talking about, the particular topic, or else he'll have time at the end to come to them. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panel. We're delighted today to be joined by Kate McCullough, who is nominated for an IFTA for Best Cinematographer for her work on Arracht by Tom Sullivan, which is a wonderful film. Yeah, I'm sure many of you have seen it now at home. She's also shot Blood and I, Dolores, both of which have been nominated as well for IFTAs, and recently worked on Normal People. She's also worked on a lot of documentaries, including Emer Reynolds' The Farthest, and is currently working on Phil Lynott Songs for While I'm Away. But we're also joined by Cathal Waters, who's nominated this year for an IFTA for his highly acclaimed work on Rosie. He's worked a lot across film and television. Recently, he's also shot FINKY, Dark Lies the Island, Handsome Devil, Papi Chulo, A Dark Song, Viva, and his TV work includes Peaky Blinders, as well as homegrown talents such as Taken Down, Finding Joy, on Klondike. So very impressive CV as well there. And we also have Piers McGrail, who has delivered some outstanding work on 3 of our nominated best films this year, Ordinary Love, Calm with Horses, and Never Grow Old, for which he's nominated for Best Cinematography. He's also worked on Lorcan Finnegan's debut Without Name, Tomato Red from Juanita Wilson, and Gerard Barrett's Glassland. So again, another incredibly strong DOP. We've got such an incredible array of talent in cinematography here in Ireland. We're also joined by our moderator, Ian Power, who we're delighted to have moderating this session. Ian's an award-winning film director, screenwriter, and an award-winning commercials director. He's first featured The Runway, starred Damien Bashir, who some of you might know for his Oscar nomination for Best Actor, Kerry Condon, and James Cosmo, and was nominated for an IFTA for Best Film and Best Director. He recently made a short film called The Tattoo, which has won numerous awards and has won awards for his commercials work for people like BT and National Lottery and many, many more. So I'm going to hand you over to Ian and our panel now. Again, if you do have questions, please do ask them in the chat box. We'll go for about 90 minutes and enjoy the panel. Thank you so much for joining us. Ian.
Thank you. Thanks, Gar. Morning, guys. Great to have you all. I'm not seeing anybody except our panelists, which is fine, maybe less intimidating. I wanted to start by asking the panelists about their why, and this is something that came. I did a Q&A for IFTA a few years ago with the DOP Sean Bobbitt, who's Steve McQueen's DOP, and I came across an interview with him where he talked about being in a diamond mine and on a very early sort of experimental film with Steve McQueen, and he was filming a guy drilling. And he said there came a point where normally I would have cut the camera, but it kind of struck me that I shouldn't cut. And Steve didn't call cut. And he kind of comes back to that moment as a DOP as a sort of a defining moment. And you can kind of draw a through line to that, from that to the guy sweeping up the piss in Hunger on the corridor, or Fassbender running through New York in Shame. And it struck me as a kind of, maybe this is a good question to begin with, because all of our panelists are incredibly adept technicians, but their success is, in my opinion, indexed to their sensibility as storytellers and cinematic DOPs. So my first question is there a moment for you guys that kind of defined what it's all about for you in cinema? Maybe, Kate, do you want to start with that? No pressure.
Start with the big question.
The why.
I'll just go off here for an hour and I'll come back with some kind of... I mean, I think that's kind of an ongoing thing. I'm not sure I had sort of a defining moment. I mean, like, I guess my first kind of curiosity about film came in the form of Hoop Dreams, which was a documentary I watched like back in my teens, and sort of wondered like, how could I end up in those scenarios where I'm outside of my comfort zone, or I'm in a world that's not familiar to me. And so, yeah, I guess there was definite curiosity to sort of find a way to, enter those worlds. And I guess I was always kind of driven by painting, photography, like that was sort of my thing as a kid. So it sort of seemed to make sense that was my entry point in a sense. And I think I spent quite a number of years doing documentary and sort of traveling around the world. And it's just a great way to kind of gather a catalogue of human experience and observation. And yeah, I mean, I don't, maybe I'm kind of wandering off a little bit here, but I suppose it's just always a kind of drive to like put yourself into a situation where you're kind of challenging your preconceptions about things, about the world, about people, about relationships, or how the world works, I guess. So yeah, if I find myself kind of in a scenario where I've been before, or it's too comfortable, in a way, I don't really kind of, I don't switch on. Like I just kind of become a little bit horizontal. So I think, just having a camera, hiding behind the camera, it's a kind of a comfortable space for me. I mean, I guess I grew up like I was, the youngest kid, and so I quite happily sort of sat back and observed like what was going on, and family dynamics and stuff. And so I think that's just a kind of a natural space for me, is to observe, and I think it's probably quite a useful tool when it comes to cinematography.
It's interesting that, though, it definitely shines through in your work, that idea of being kind of part of the story. So yeah, really telling. Piers, what about you?
I don't have a very good like diamond mine story or anything like that, but
why not?
I think it's sorry. To pick up on what Kate said, I was actually an only child, so that I think I had a similar kind of sitting back and kind of looking at things attitude as a kid as well. And film-wise, I think it's probably just a combination of all the stuff I did really early on in film school, and the first few music videos, and those kind of jobs, I think, are the ones that I keep returning to creatively, and trying to bring some of that into the work that I'm doing now, because there's an energy and a kind of, just a discovery that happened then that I kind of miss now, and I think that I'm always trying to get back to that and bring some of that into the more kind of formal shoots that you end up on now. So I guess that it's a general year. It's not a diamond mine, but it's all that kind of stuff that I started out with would be that kind of formative point for me, I think.
I think that's a really good point of, like, you can learn how to do everything and forget to do what it was that was your strength, that kind of rawness. So yeah, I think I know what you mean about wanting to kind of hark back to the beginnings. The better you get, so you don't end up looking like everybody else, sort of thing. What about you, Carl? Is there a?
I'm not sure I 100% understand the question, but just everything.
I suppose it's about a defining moment.
What's that?
A defining moment.
A defining moment. I guess, like, I remember there was one defining moment, and I was shooting Viva film in Cuba with Paddy Brannock, and there was a fight scene between the father and son. They sit down at a table, and I remember we hadn't necessarily rehearsed it, and then we went, and basically Paddy didn't call cut. The actors kept acting, and I kept shooting, and something magic happened there and I've said this loads of times before, but like something magic happened there that it was such a collaborative effort to get this moment, and it wasn't necessarily in the script, but it was complete story. And suddenly it was like everything we had been doing came together from every department. It was such a collaborative thing, and it wasn't like, it was elaborately lit. It wasn't, it wasn't a beautiful shot, but it was just everything coming together. So I think the collaborative nature, to be honest, I'm very selfish because I enjoy it so much, and getting a shot, framing up a shot, it's just like a drug, that it's, it's all about the process for me, that, if I enjoy it on the day, that's great. And then everything else is a bonus, seeing it on a big screen, that's a complete bonus, and it's amazing. So it's like, I love the camaraderie of crews, of working together, and the collaborative nature of it. But, I don't know if that's answering the question.
No, it is, absolutely. I suppose it was really just to try and get a general orientation first of where you guys are coming from, and I think all of you have done a really good job of setting that out. Do you want to start? Sorry, I go.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, like, I think it's about getting I remember listening to Susie LaBelle talking about normal people. She did a great podcast recently, and she was just talking about trying to get a certain sense of truth. And I think that's amazing when it's actually real, and the edifice of filming and all of that is actually irrelevant, and it's actually filming something that's real. And like Kate has done so many documentaries, I've done some, like I spent 20 years doing documentaries, and now I kind of prefer drama because you can actually manipulate and try and get a truth there. So I think that's what kind of excites me, in the idea that you're trying to find the truth, but with drama, and that you're actually trying to manufacture it in collaboration with others.
I think that's a really interesting, like, I mean, I think that's what we're all sort of striving for, is that kind of synthesis, you know, that moment where all the departments come together and it's like, you know, it's sort of all captured down through the barrel of the lens. And it sounds kind of obvious, but it's it's actually quite rare that it, you know, to kind of continually get that that rhythm working on set. It's yeah, it's quite tricky.
Very tricky now with masks, and you can't hug, you can't do anything.
It is magic, though. It's its own kind of magic, lightning in a bottle sort of stuff. But no, I know exactly what you're talking about. Do you want to talk, guys, about sort of, if we go, or talk for today as a structure, if we go through this sort of process of starting with, you know, when the script comes in the door, what's your approach to kind of the script and the process of prepping for a project, not just with the director, but with other departments like the production designer or locations, even producer, or anything that might be relevant in that early stage of, you know, the job has just arrived in, or the potential job has just arrived in. Piers, do you want to kick off?
I mean, I guess the first thing is just to pick a good script, I suppose, and that's tricky, and that there's not many out there, and but when one does come in and it's really good, it's quite amazing, and it's quite, you're really hungry for it. So that just picking the script is the first kind of hurdle, I guess. And then in terms of prep, usually how it usually works with me is you'll kind of do an interview for the job over Skype or something, and I try not to bring too much to it. I'll just read the script and then kind of listen to what they're thinking, and try and connect with the director, and then after that I'll kind of send through some references and see if we're seeing eye to eye, and that's a very original starting point for me. And then prep I find prep kind of pretty boring and difficult and tricky. There's a lot of negativity in prep. Often it's kind of about, well, you can't do this, and problems, and it's a totally different experience to filming for me, and I just can't wait to get kind of shooting. So I mean, there's lots of beautiful things that you need to do in prep. I do a lot of scouts, and I take a lot of photographs, and you talk with the director a lot, basically, and you kind of just try and get inside their head and see what their thought process is behind the script, and the kind of the more kind of weighty things, I suppose. But yeah, I find it a bit of a drudge prep, and it's often quite long and drawn out, and there's an awful lot of meetings, and it can be quite, for a young DOP, it can be quite daunting, because you're thrown into these kind of meetings, and there's an expectation there that and you don't know what it is originally, when you're starting out. And you have the production meeting, which is like this massive kind of, everyone in the crew, like there's 50 people or something in a big read through in a production meeting, and it's a bit like an AA meeting, and it's the whole thing is kind of daunting. And then really when you get onto the set, that's where it all is, I think, and it's just you and the director and the cast, and for me that's a comfortable kind of working space, and that's my journey into the shoot.
Do you use like when you say references and stuff, or what are you referencing? Are you referencing paintings or films, or?
I mean, it's usually other films. I don't have a really good reference bank of art. I like art, but I don't have all my reference points are films, really. And there's an amazing website called Film Grab, which an Irish guy made actually, and it's got stills from all these different films, so you can kind of go through and pick out stuff that you know or stuff that you don't know and find some really good imagery.
There's another one actually called Shot Deck. I don't know. Have you heard of Shot Deck?
Use that. Yeah.
No, I haven't. No.
That's really impressive.
But those tools are amazing because it's a great resource, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I guess sitting down to, well, yeah, I guess you read the script first. That's first and foremost, and I try to, well, I'm trying at the moment to sort of choose scripts that are, you know, that I'm, you know, that really kind of excite me, and so, you know, it has to have some kind of a hook or a catch of like, okay, I can sort of relate to that, or I can't relate to that at all. So that's kind of interesting. I want to get into that and see what's going on. So yeah, I mean, so far I've been kind of lucky to sort of be involved in projects that, you know, that it's like I'm fully sort of engaged in the script and driven by it. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess that's where all the conversations begin and end. It's like, you know, it's in the script and what's, you know, what's underneath the text, like the subtext, or, you know, what's beyond, you know, an action or a gesture. And so, yes, getting to know the director, getting a sense of what they like, and probably also just as important to know what they don't like. That can often be an easier way to go at it. And just to try and establish like a clear line of communication, because everybody has a different way of communicating and sort of trying to kind of get inside their head in a sense, and what's, you know, what's the tone of the script and the rhythm of it, and you know, is there sort of a strong color sense about it, or composition. So yeah, it's I mean, I guess in a way I probably reference stills more than films. I mean, I think if there's a particular rhythm for a scene, I'll maybe pull out a scene from a film. But I often kind of like the precision of stills in the way that you can kind of observe quite precisely what's going on in that image, as opposed to kind of a accumulation of images. So
you've done a lot of really beautiful work on location. How involved in the sort of location process? Like, are you waiting for a tech recce, or are you kind of, you know,
I'm there as soon as
involved
I get in.
Yeah.
The door is open, I'm like waiting. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, it all starts getting going. I mean, actually, in contrast to Piers, I quite like prep, because I think maybe always with documentary, you just felt like you were never prepared, or you were underprepared. Of course, you never know what's going to happen, but I just actually really like sort of breaking down the script and sort of dreaming. Of course, like, there is the reality of budget and all the rest of it, but I like the sense of possibility, and sort of playing around with that. And of course, in the end of the day, you know, the spinning discs have to kind of find a place, but like, going to the location is a huge kind of, it just starts to kind of ground the story and sort of start to kind of bring it to life. It's no longer kind of a 2D thing. It's starting to kind of carve itself out. So yeah, I think like getting to the location and getting in there with the director and having time, so it's not like, you know, a kind of committee meeting traipsing around, which happens on the recce. Is to get time with the director on location and really kind of just explore, I guess.
Yeah, get to do that stuff that you don't have time to do, like when you're actually shooting. Yeah, I hear you completely.
And you also, I mean, just the more time you can get seeing how the light is behaving in that space, you know, then you might see just some kind of dance of light on location when you're there, you know, first time, and then you think, okay, you know what, let's try and actually recreate that in some way on the day. Like I'm preparing for a feature at the moment, and this one location in the room has this kind of like, it's very dark, but there's loads of trees outside the window, and the light is just kind of filtering in such a way that there's kind of like this very subtle kind of movement on the wall. And it's kind of unsettling. And so we were like, wow, that's brilliant. Like, you know, like it just kind of drawing on existing, you know, like, I guess that's a really good teacher, really, isn't it? Like just the sun, or how it's where there's no light, you know.
I think it's those sort of imperfections and interruptions are the things that you tend to miss when you're in a studio. It's like it's almost like you're starting from such a perfect place.
Mm.
Carl, do you want to talk about your kind of approach and maybe?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mixture. I don't think I'm useless with references or anything. I don't think I've ever given a still or a reference, or I'm absolutely useless at that. And directors look for them, and I procrastinate, and I've never given one still as in this is a reference to what I think it will be like. I mean, I don't know. I'm just used to trying to find them or troll through them, or and I think like what Kate was saying, I think the most important thing is get to the scout before tech recce's or anything. I mean, I want to have an input into the location as quickly as possible. And then the next thing, apart from obviously having a good relationship with the director, is to get a good relationship with the production designer, particularly if it's a big production, because I think that's key. If you're kind of, I think you start off on a basis that, you know, you're two creatives and you're going to be at war trying to make this. That's the perceived concept of a production designer and a DP. But that's like, I'm not saying that's with either DPs or production designers, but there's that sort of thing there.
Yeah.
I think there's a tension because there's two creative forces, and I think it's so important to get the two people, you know, singing off the same hymn sheet with a view to servicing whatever the director wants, you know, and giving as much as you can. So I think it's trying to formulate that relationship, go to locations as soon as possible, and then figure out. I remember doing prep on my first feature. I didn't know what I should be doing, you know. Lighting out big lighting plans was like just ridiculous. I mean, I think you need to be prepared for, like, there's certain scenes where, like, you know how you need to know how everything is lit, and then I insist on going with the gaffer well before tech recce or well before the scout, and not with anybody else. So I'll go with the gaffer to the places and say, this is how, you know, we want it lit, listen to what they might say or whatever it might be. So the tech recce then is just, you know, everything already, and you're just pointing it out. Yeah.
What are the things that you're looking for when you arrive on a location, even in advance of a tech recce? You know what I mean? What are the things that you're, as DOPs, that you guys are on point about?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, an obvious thing is, like, it's kind of budget dependent. If it's a bedroom on the second floor, it's like, well, how can I light this? So find a bedroom on the first floor, or get a north-facing bedroom or something, things like that. But then it's like, well, this bedroom has this amazing bed we can't use. Like, you know, sometimes you're forced into locations. So, you know, it's a mixture of trying to protect yourself so that you can make it look the way you want it to look, or sometimes it's a case of you just have to go with it. I remember last year doing a thing, and I put in, like, I couldn't control the windows. So I put in these massive banks of LEDs and killed the fan effect at the top. And I probably, like, I wrecked the architecture of the room looking back at it. Like, it was just a stupid thing to do. I shouldn't have over manipulated it. I should have gone with what was there. So I think sometimes, you know, I mean, I guess that's, you learn from mistakes, but anyway, I don't know what I'm saying, but there you go.
No, but I think that's a really good note, actually, that balance of, you know, how much of the lighting is imposed on the location and how much of it is coming out of the location. I think that's like the sort of main decision. I remember on my first film with PJ Dillon, Like we were way behind, weeks behind. And I said to him, I was like, we got to speed up. Is there a way that we can just like go faster? And he said, well, if things are backlit to begin with, we're like halfway there. And I was like, okay, well, you just tell me where the sun is and I'll block everything out based on that. And it just was transformative, but it was like naivety on my part, you know, kind of saying, here's the way it should be, and he's having to erect lights. So yeah, I think that idea of letting the location speak to you, and even if it's the studio trying to approach it almost like it isn't, is really good. No, are there any? You mentioned they're shooting upstairs, things like cars, nice exteriors. Are there any pieces of wisdom, like if you talk there about, you know, if I was going to do that again, and I think all filmmakers have a kind of a utility belt, like a Batman, you know, they have a bunch of things. Like I remember the first time I used the Steadicam, I didn't realize that this is back in the day, to go from high mode to low mode was like a 30-minute rebalance of the Steadicam. And all of my shots suddenly became problematic. I had to reorient the day, so I shot everything high and then everything low, or we'd have been, you know, 4 days at it. Are there specific kind of nuggets of wisdom in terms of prepping or in advance of something like, let's say, a night scene or a car or whatever, that you guys that might jump to mind?
I'm going to take out my notepad now.
I keep forgetting all the things I learned. There's some things that I can never get right, such as people coming indoors. I find that really difficult. Bathrooms can be quite tricky, and I often will solve it somewhere, and then like 2 films later come back to it and totally forget how I solved it. So I don't have, my utility belt is really bad.
I think, like, and this is something, like, I guess I've learned the hard way over the years, is like, once you start trying to light something, and then sometimes you need to jump back and go, you know what, I'm wrong, start again. And like, I think it takes guts to be able to go and put your hand up and say, okay, let's take that down. Let's not do that. And sometimes it's very difficult to do that, but sometimes it is the easiest way out to say, listen, I messed up there. Can we just start that again? Or whatever it is. Sometimes you can fudge that and blame the gaffer or something, but you know what I mean? It is this sort of thing of going, standing back from yourself and going, is there an easier way to do this and I think often, like, I think that, okay, this is the shot, whereas in actual fact, it's just the sense of somebody coming in. So if you shoot it a different way, it'll solve your problem, and suddenly you don't have to put up loads of lamps outside or nets or whatever, and it doesn't really matter to the director, you know. So I guess it's trying to make it easy on yourself as well.
I think that what you're talking about there, and those moments of having to backpedal or whatever it is, they're the times when the relationship that you were talking about with your production designer or your first AD or your director, that's when they really manifest and pay off. You know, if you've established trust at that point, and the importance of kind of, you know, people feeling like, you know, if you are changing something, it's because you know what you're doing. That's kind of the balance. So yeah, I think what you were saying about like avoiding what might be a sort of a cliched perception of, you know, the DOP is in conflict with the sound recordist or in conflict with the production designer. The more you can chase that collaborative thing that Katie was talking about is you know, the better. Was there any other nuggets that you guys wanted to?
I think like the spontaneity is actually quite a good thing to have in your utility belt. And actually the one thing that I would have carried across a lot of films is that some of the best stuff is you have to be a little bit flexible, and sometimes it's a bit you get a bit, you know, a director will spot something and it will be totally different to what you set up for or something, and you can be a little bit thrown, but it's almost always the great stuff, you know, that kind of the little surprise moments, and I think being able to kind of to go off plan is pretty important.
Do you, from that point of view, how do you lean on storyboards? Do you like storyboards? Do you prefer stuff not to be boarded? Do you have a particular take on that?
For me, it's usually a lot of the stuff can't afford to be boarded entirely. So you'd often, I mean, I do find them a little bit restrictive, I guess, but they can be really useful for action scenes. They're really they're really useful tools to show everybody scenes. So for safety and for stunts, I think they're good. I've never done anything that's entirely boarded. It'd be kind of interesting actually, but they can be useful, and I think coming in with commercials and stuff, they're always boarded, I suppose. They can be a little bit too prescriptive, and especially if you're working on location or something where they've been boarded without seeing the location. It's not that much use, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I did a film with Liam Gavin, a dark song, and he was a storyboard artist beforehand, so he had the whole film storyboarded, but I refused to look at it. You know, there's no way. Like, otherwise, what's the point? I know it's whatever he said went at the end of the day. He was the director, but I felt that if I looked at that, then he wasn't going to get anything out of me. He wasn't going to get anything fresh or new ideas or objective view, because everything would be colored by what he had said. But like Piers was saying, for action stuff, storyboarding is great. And even trying to sell sequences to producers, it's like, this is what I want to do. This is how it's going to look. It's a good way of doing it. So I think they're useful tools, but used very sparingly.
Kate, would you have any thoughts on that?
I'm really good at drawing like stick men. I mean, actually, I spent like years drawing and wanted to go to art school and everything, but somehow that's all like behind me and I can't remember how to draw just when I need to. But yeah, I mean, I find it useful in prep, just communicating with the director, not necessarily saying this is the shot, but like, how do you feel about, it's just a kind of a bounce board in a way. But like, I think having storyboards on the day is it's quite prescriptive. I mean, yes, of course, with action sequences, or if you've got multiple cameras, then it's helpful to get everybody on the same page. But I think a lot of the time, it goes back to that thing of like sort of preparing and, having your shot list or whatever. But like on the day, you do need to be open to what's happening and what's evolving on set in the block through, and like again getting back to trying to capture the truth of the scene. You can have all these like great ideas, but then sometimes on the day it's like, wow, okay, that really isn't going to work and there's no point in forcing it. And I think it's, again, like I've been in that situation where I've overlit a scene and sort of thought, wow, okay, mental note. It didn't need to be, it's I guess it's a kind of a nervous thing where you feel like you're not sure where the emphasis of the action is and who's the most important character, and it kind of comes back to not maybe knowing or having those conversations with the director, or if the script is a little bit weak at that point or whatever. But yeah, it's all trying to just keep your eyes open to possibility on the day.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the other aspect of prep is a more technical aspect of choice of like camera and lenses. I mean, we don't need to get lost in the rabbit hole, but I think people would like to get an idea of, what you guys are drawn to and want to come back to, or if the kit is entirely dependent on the job. Do you want to maybe start by talking about that, Piers?
Yeah. I think you just get used to certain cameras after a while, and it's a bit of a comfort thing, really. So I don't think there's a massive difference between the higher end cameras. I think I used to shoot quite a lot on the Red, because I actually had a Red when I started out, and that got me all my work at first. So I shot a lot of that, and then I started using Alexa, and I just found that a little bit more simple to use, and a little bit, I like the eyepiece, little things like that. And since then I've kind of mostly shot on the Alexa, but it kind of veers. Like I did a TV series in England, and they had been shooting on the Sony, so we shot on the Sony Venice, and I'm not overly technical, I guess, in choices, but I do like my comforts, and then so I would generally push for the Alexa because I'm familiar with it and I know right through to the other end what I can get out of it. So that would inform my choice. And then lens-wise, that would be more down to the script and you know and what the director is looking for. Although it's quite restrictive these days, particularly, it's quite hard to source specific lenses, and often your choice is quite narrow. But I do think that's an important visual choice for the film, and that does impact on the story overall. So I'll be kind of heavily involved with that choice.
Do you tend to use a lot of glass, like in filters on set, or kind of wait for the DI, or is it about I try and do everything as much as possible on set, and not leave, and just make the DI a corrective kind of finishing touch kind of thing. So I do use diffusion quite a lot, but like very light diffusion, just to take away from the sharpness of digital. I've shot a little bit of film, but it's almost, it's 99% digital, everything that I've done. And I'm definitely a film nostalgist, and everything I do is trying to make it look like film. I'm not one of those DPs that embraces visual for what it looks like. I really love how film looks, and everything I do, to be honest, is just emulating that, which is probably like a failure on my part, but that's the way I approach it, and yeah, that's what I do. I think it's a really good note, because I as a director, there's nothing worse than kind of ending up in a grading suite with a sort of a neutral look that you then have to apply a look after the fact. So I think, yeah, finding that on set's really important. I know Robert Richardson is kicking up stink about DIs being, looks being reimagined in DIs at the moment. But do you want to talk, Kate, about your sort of approach to the technical side of things?
Yeah, I guess I try to be open, like on each project, for trying new gear, but yeah, there are the little kind of comfort tools that well and work well.
What are they?
Actually, sorry.
Like what? What are the comfort?
I guess I'm quite fond of the Alexa, and kind of know its range and its capabilities. I also own the camera for a number of years, and so I think it's it just becomes kind of an extension of you. And so, like, swapping onto another sensor, it's probably not a huge difference between them ultimately, but I think it's probably a combination of the glass and the sensor for me, and filtration, and then the light. So at the moment I'm trying to push myself out of my comfort zone, and I'm thinking of shooting on the Sony for a number of reasons. So I think it's good to kind of also challenge yourself a bit with different technology if it makes sense for the project. And then, like, lens wise, I was always quite fond of putting like old glass on new sensors, but more recently I've sort of, I suppose, become more familiar with the sort of I guess the subtlety between even a couple of millimeters difference in focal lengths, and I kind of want more of a range of focal lengths. So that then means that you have to go to sort of newer glass. So that's maybe just a phase I'm in. I think you go through phases of things, but don't use Zoom so much, but currently considering mixing it up with a zoom and primes. So yeah, I think it just really depends on what's, I guess there's always a couple of key factors, like, is there lots of movement? Are you looking at shooting night scenes? What's the palette of the film? Like, are the skin tones, what sort of texture are you after? Do you want some grain in there? So yeah, I guess I'm always kind of harking back to the film look as well. Ultimately, I mean, I shot a little bit on 16mm in school, in college, but ever since then it's been pretty much digital. Yeah.
Cathal?
I guess I mainly I shoot a lot on red. I have done in the past, and I've shot a lot on Alexa. So to be honest, it's either Alexa or red. And a few years ago, like I owned an Alexa and I owned a red, and you know, sometimes I mix them up, you know, as a second camera. And when you get in and you grade them, I couldn't tell the difference, being honest. I think it's most important is the glass in front of it. I really like shooting in RAW because I like being involved in the grading process. And then lenses I absolutely love are Zeiss Super Speeds. I have a set of them, and I just think they're amazing. They're so small, compact. They're amazing for handheld, and I think you can create different looks with them. And I use diffusion filters on every shot I shoot, which is kind of weird. That, you know, even last year I was using very expensive lenses, and they weren't Zeiss Super Speeds now. They were Master Anamorphics, and I'm putting like €200 bits of glass in front of them to break them down. It's kind of like weird, but you're always trying to give it a, you know, give it a broken down feel, I guess. So yeah, so I've never shot in Sony Venice. I heard great things about it. I mean, I don't know, I'm not massively in, you know, I think Alexa and Red are amazing, and I hear great things about Sony, but I think the glass is really important. And then I did a thing with Lomo Anamorphics, and they were beautiful. So I think I'd go for ultra glass, but I really like Zeiss Super Speeds. And I think it's what you're used to as well. But as well, like I know how to light for them because they're 1.3. So I know instinctively what that's going to look like and how they're going to react. So, you know, 1.3 in the close focus is really close to camera. So, you know, I know them so well. So I enjoy using them.
You mentioned a preference for shooting in RAW. Do you want, I mean, this is without getting overly technical. Do you want to talk a little about that to whoever is watching who may not know what you're talking about?
I think, look, I'm not massively technical, but it gives you more latitude in the post. So effectively, what you're putting on, the look you're putting on, and like Piers was saying, everything I shoot, that's how I want it to look. I'll never say to a director, oh, in post we'll do this and that and the other. And obviously, if it's blue screen and all that, we can talk about that. But it really is trying to create the image that, you know, you want to see on screen, trying to create that there. Like, and you know, I'll use filters, I'll use lighting to do that. But then in like if you're shooting in RAW, basically the latitude between, you know, protecting the highlights, you know, if they're blown out a little bit, you can flick to RAW and you can see, okay, there is detail there, I'll be able to grab that back, or whatever it is. But it really depends on the project and whether I'm going to be involved in the grade and all of that sort of thing. But like everything I've done so far, I'm very heavily involved with the grade, and I will have, you know, a say over it. So I'm not worried about somebody getting it and changing it completely.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a real political benefit to it, actually, from a DOP's point of view, which is, you know, if you're going after a look, and there's any sort of like a producer or someone from a TV station or a client in a commercial who's like, oh, this feels a little too much.
Hello?
Just lost.
Sorry, Ian, we lost you. You were going to say something really important.
You all looked incredibly interested. Then I was like, they're not really moving. They were all like, I don't know where you cut off. What I was saying was, I think that there's a political benefit to shooting in RAW from a DOP's point of view, particularly if you're doing what you guys are talking about, which is, you know, really going after the look on the day. If there is a voice in the background, a producer or a client or a TV station or whoever it is that kind of said, you know, that feels a little too bright or a little too much, you know, in a certain direction, being able to say, well, it's in RAW and we can grade it back if we need to, is a really nice way to kind of stick to guns and without feeling like you're you know, going too far down the road. But so I think there's a value from a political point of view as well, even if you never adjust it in the grade.
I've never shot anything on raw. Just to say, with the electric anyway, the log is pretty good. I think it's always come down to just a cost thing. I know the red was always raw actually when I shot it, and maybe I should be trying that more. It's a bit easier now, I think, isn't it? That you on it and stuff.
Yeah, I just think like log is amazing as well. It just gives you a bit more latitude.
Yeah.
That's
good.
Yeah, there is for sure more, like in terms of bringing detail out of shadows and things like that. You definitely would notice in the raw, but yeah, there is the log version isn't going to kill, you know, freedom creatively after the fact. For sure, I think it's a good point.
But sorry to interrupt one more time, but the politics of it is interesting, and I kind of clashed with that on a job I did recently where we shot kind of flashbacks in black and white, and always were lit for black and white and should have been black and white. And of course, when it came to the grade, the execs and the producers had decided that it should be color, and they didn't like how different it looked. So, you know, if I had a choice, if there was a button on the camera that said, if this is only black and white, I mean, I would have definitely turned that button. You know, it can come back to haunt you a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I guess the fact that, like, just coming to the idea of raw, like, you know, that you shoot with, well, at least I shoot with intent. I think most cinematographers do. You know, you're hired for your sensibilities and sort of, you know, creating a look or, you know, carving it out image-wise. And I think, you know, like coming to the grade and thinking that you can just, oh, we didn't like that on the day, so we can just change it all. You know, afterwards is kind of like, it's counterproductive completely, and sort of it just only ends kind of forcing the image, you know, and losing its integrity. So I think, yeah, you have to just be careful with how that whole area is kind of managed.
And then in terms of lights, I mean, obviously this is a kind of a conversation that ends up being budgetary most of the time, you know, like you shoot on, it used to be like there was a push to shoot on tungsten because it was cheaper, but then it also looked kind of better. But, you know, now we have this kind of revolution in lighting with LEDs and sky panels and things like that. Do you guys have a sort of a take on what that's brought to the table in terms of your own styles, or has it brought anything to the table, or does it matter, or is it just about it makes things a little bit easier? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just from my point of view, being able to sort of, you know, choose a color that's particular to that location on the day, or in you know, within that 10 minutes before you roll the camera is quite useful in a sense, because you can sort of make plans beforehand and sort of say, okay, we're going to use this lamp and it's going to be, you know, 56 or whatever, and put this gel on. But like actually when you start to, you know, get the lamps in place and start to get a feel of it, you know, something else will crop up. It's that thing of like, you know, being open to possibility. And I think having those neuro lamps where you can just kind of dial through the color temperature, especially sky panels, are just incredible modular kind of units. So I think just having that scope, like, I mean, before it was, you know, you were quite, I mean, I guess you were either choosing like tungsten or daylight, and then kind of choosing your gels when you started the job, as opposed to kind of being able to respond when it's happening. So I think that's quite, that's a huge benefit for me.
Piers, like from your, like I noticed in a lot of your recent stuff, there seems to be more of a range of color employed. Is that as a result of, or
it could be
because of that?
I think they're really useful. They're really amazing, actually. Those new, like the sky panels, and then there's the tubes, the Astera tubes they're called, which are like fluorescent, battery operated fluorescent tubes, basically. So it's really fast. One of the really slow things on set is kind of changing gels, and often it would happen. It's difficult, in the middle of, you might have rehearsed a scene, and then the sparks have to come in and cut a gel and put it up, and it's crinkly and it's kind of distracting, and to be able to just dial in a little bit of color. I mean, color is always quite important to me, and even with daylight, I'd be kind of quite subtly changing the color temperature, especially with digital. I think it's really sensitive, so I'd often add like a little bit of green to HMI or something. So to be able to just do that precisely and quietly, and even for me to be able to go and adjust it a little bit, I find that really, really, really cool. And changing dimming it myself, or if it's a big setup, I've done it where the gaffer has just an iPad and he's able to kind of change things. Or you have I did the film with the black and white issue before. We used lots of color in the modern day scenes there, and those Astera tubes were amazing because it was in America, and we had these kind of old motels where I wanted to have like fluorescent lights under the underhang, and it would have been really expensive from a production design point of view to put in practical fluorescence. So we were able to just kind of put these battery lights under there, and they match up really well, and you can control the color and everything. It's great. It's really good. I still come back to tungsten a lot for certain things, like for moonlight. I find it strong. Moonlight and sunlight, I think you can't really beat a big tungsten lamp. There's something about the quality of light. And again, on digital, I think it's more sensitive to it. That I think it's very effective. But yeah, the LEDs are amazing for all those reasons.
Oh,
yeah, no, everything Piers said there, like, the sky panels are so, they're brilliant. And the Astera tubes I was on a job last year, I had so many sky panels, it's embarrassing. Like, they're amazing for lighting sets, they're so soft, use them a lot. And then, so I think it's just another tool. I mean, I think, starting out, I think I probably use, well, probably people would disagree, I use less lights now than I did then, when I was starting out. I think that's a certain thing. But yeah, likewise, I use the Astera tubes in windows where I'd have to be shooting during the day and I'd want some sense of the outside, and I'd line them in window frames. And then you can control them all off an iPad, get the same hue, get the same intensity. So yeah, I mean, I think LEDs are incredibly versatile. But yeah, it's another bow in the armory, I guess. But yeah.
Do you want to talk about actual, like, the sort of onset process of kind of lighting a scene? Maybe just starting with, you arrived there for the initial blocking, or what are the sort of steps for you and the watch outs or the process?
Yeah. Well, beforehand, obviously, I'll have seen it I'll have okayed it on the Scout, and then I'll have seen it on Recce, and so I'll have been there a long time. I'll know where the sun is if it's not in a set. I'll know where the sun is. I've already put in my request to shoot it at a certain time of day, and if I can't, I might have a sun block there if budget allows it, so I can control and maintain consistency throughout the scene. So I mean, there's so many things there, but I guess in terms of looking at a room, it obviously comes from the story first. What's the feeling of this? What's the vibe of this? Sometimes I think when you're working, and sorry, I get back to that, but just, it's also the vibe of the whole thing you're doing. Do people need to look very lit, or are they, is it a beauty piece? I find sometimes I work myself into a way where people need to be nicely lit, and sometimes you want to feel that a bit more gritty, and you're at odds into how you can try and go for that, and you have to be careful of that. And even your grittiness isn't as gritty as you want it to go because it's defined by other things. I know that's kind of strange, but like when you're dealing
I think that's a really good note, and I think that I think it's something to talk about, that notion of, you know, the other things that are defining the lighting, which are, like, from my point of view as a director, is like first and foremost the performance. And, you know, there is a point with the sort of aesthetic where you can end up with so much stuff on the floor and so much like restriction as to what an actor can do, depending on the sort of look that the DOP is chasing, that it really starts to inhibit performance. Are you kind of like, are you of the opinion, let the actors do what they want and I'll light it, or I need them to go here and do this? Do you know what I'm getting
yeah.
at there?
No, I like during the blocking, typically they block the scene, they can do whatever they like. And then if I have an issue with it, and the issue is only time, it's kind of like, yeah, we can do that, but it's going to take time. If they're insistent on standing by the window, it's going to take time. Is there any chance they can stand here? I mean, I would say that maybe once every 6 weeks. Do you know what I mean? I always go with whatever the action is going to happen, I light it that way rather than dictate it. Now, sometimes it's like, this is the perfect place here, and actors will go with that as well. But again, it depends on the level. Is it a low budget? Is it this? Is, you know, there's so many parameters to be involved. And also the actor, are they actors you can tell, you know, any chance you could do the scene here? Because some actors just do the scene where they want to do the scene, you know.
And how do you, in terms of the politics of that call, is that you talk direct to the actor, or would you broker it through the director, or in a more open way, or
It depends. I'd usually go through the director when, like, I'm always there during blocking, obviously. I'd usually go through the director and kind of go, look, this is the best place. I can do whatever you want. This is the best place for light, you know. And usually people will react to that, but sometimes they tell you to go in no uncertain terms. And if you go through the actor or go through the director, they tell the director to feck off, not me, which is great. Which happened with two famous actors. It was brilliant. It was great. But yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, like I have a notion of how I want it to look well before we get there. And then it's just a case of doing that. And I would try and have very little on the floor so that we're flexible in terms of moving around and that. But it really is dependent on budget level, you know.
What about you guys? Anything to add to that, or totally different take?
The schedule has quite a big impact on it. In a lot of cases, I mean, you have to kind of generally be arriving to a set that's kind of most of the way there, rather than just seeing a blocking and having the freedom to totally light based on the blocking. So usually I'd be turning up. We'd have a lot in place, and then we'd see the blocking and do a little bit of tweaking and shoot probably. But one trick that you can do is to come in, is to be there early enough that you can move the furniture a little bit, or you know, before the actors arrive. That's a good tip, I think. And the other thing I say is that the blocking is so crucial, I think, and really trying to find natural blocking and trying to find is really difficult, I think, and really it's very easy, and often the schedule, as you said, the schedule kind of dictates it, that you end up with slightly more conventional blocking, but I think scenes often work really well when actors kind of inhibit the space quite naturally, and I think finding that it's difficult on a schedule, and I think it takes a while to get that right. And I think if you can afford it at the time, that's a good thing to work out, and it often complements the lighting actually rather than fights it. If you find the right blocking, you'll find that it makes it a bit more effortless, I think.
Yeah,
it was a great story. Sorry, go ahead, Kate.
Sorry. No, I was just thinking about the blocking point that you made there. I think often, like, if you just take the extra 5-10 minutes to sort of tease it out and find a sort of a compromise, you know, that everybody's sort of coming together to because ultimately you're all trying to work towards the same thing, you know. So like I think you can end up then saving time in a way if you take those extra 5-10 minutes just to make sure that it's going to work, and that you're going to be sort of economical. Like, I guess that's my origins is in economy. Like with documentary, it's all about just finding the right spot for the camera.
Yeah, I think that's a very good, even just what you're saying there about the economy of a blocking, because what kind of, when I think back, earlier stuff that I did, kind of shorts and stuff, there would be the race would be to get to start lighting the scene while the actors were offset, and then you kind of had the blocking when the scene was lit. It was completely counterintuitive, and it might feel like you're wasting time having this moment where you're blocking out a scene and you're working out the actor, giving the actor the kind of latitude to do whatever feels right in the moment. The economy, that is an economy. It doesn't feel like it, because for all intents and purposes, it's a bunch of people standing around, unlit actors, you know, doing their thing. But the economy of that and the breakthroughs that you come up with in those sessions, that's the thing that, you know, is going to claw back time ultimately. And sometimes when you're under pressure, and that kind of what I always call the kickbollock and scramble at the end of the day, you know, you like 6 or 7 shots to do. Sometimes the best thing you can do is actually stop, slow down, stop, take a moment, even if you've minutes left, because what you're chasing in a blocking, in an unblocked scene is, you know, kind of too ideal, and you need to come back to the sort of practicals of it. So I think that's a really good note for, as a director, that's something that I would definitely feel is really beneficial.
It also depends on the director to a certain extent, because I've worked with the director I've worked with a few times, Ivan Kavanagh, who I did the Western with. He doesn't rehearse, and he doesn't block at all. So you kind of he knows where he wants. He decides where he wants to put the actors, and you kind of light the space as they would, and then you shoot it, which can be tricky because they can obviously have their own idea and they'll move around a little bit. So sometimes you're kind of the process is defined by the director as much as anything else.
I mean, in that situation, are you legislating for kind of like, okay, I need to, you know, there's no point in saying to the actor, you can't move off that mark, you know, I need to allow for the fact that it's going to have to breathe a little when it starts? Or
yeah, I mean, what would often happen is you do the first take, and you know they'd stand up and you tilt up and there'd be a light there or something. So you're kind of finding a little bit, and I think Ivan would understand that, and that's just, he doesn't like to prescribe things too much, so he's happy for you to adjust after the first take, say. But that's it's just there are different ways of doing it, I suppose, and that's one example.
Do all of you guys operate? Are you all operating the camera?
By choice, yes. I did a thing last year, the Alienist last year, and I didn't. I had 2 cameras going the whole time, so I was lighting it, and then so no, I didn't then. But by choice, I would operate all the time.
Do you want to talk about the why of that?
Well, I think like it's, you know, that's why I want to do what I'm doing, and you're certainly much more involved in it. Now, like last year, there were, like, I was dealing with such massive sets, like it nearly becomes management, and then trying to get through creative underneath all of the management in terms of lighting and all of that, because there were big sets or big set pieces, lots of extras, that sort of thing. So like, I do feel if you're not operating, you're removed from the creative process. I mean, there's nothing like, you know, the clip from Rosie, like, you know, for me, operating with the camera on my shoulder is, I think it comes back to having done documentary for so many years. It's just the idea of being intuitive with the camera and being able to react to the actors. And I think actors react to that when it's not on dolly and tracks and it's handheld and you're with the actors, depending on the scene, obviously. But for me, I think operating is massively important for me.
Kate, do you want to talk about that? Because a show like Normal People, it almost feels like the camera is another member of the cast, you know, and how important a role that operating a show like that has in terms of, you know, it's part of the performance kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, it's actually a very pertinent question, because when I met with Hetty MacDonald, the director from the second block, she was really adamant that I operated, and up to that point I had done 2 TV series, one comedy and one drama. And so I had like the first series I'd operated the whole thing, but the second one at some point I bumped up the focus puller to operate Rob Flood, and it just freed me up. We were like running behind, and so I thought, okay, well, this might be a solution. And it was kind of fascinating to sort of, you know, to step back, but to try and still be involved. And by the end of it, we had quite a nice sort of, you know, shorthand. And I think like with an operator, like if you're going to go that route, you need to have, it needs to just feel like an extension of you. I mean, I think if it becomes remote, then it's a whole nother kind of animal in a way. But so when I met with Hetty, I was very much in the zone of like, okay, this is the schedule. I'm not sure, you know, I think I had just sort of like a paranoia. I wasn't going to be able to manage the schedule without an operator. It was just like something in my head. And she was like, obviously, you know, smart and huge amount of experience in TV, and was like, no, like this is totally manageable. And you know, this series really demands you know, an emotional intelligence with the camera, and that it's very much like you're in tune with the actors. And so I kind of just trusted her gut on it, and I'm just so glad that I did. You know, I couldn't actually see it any other way now. Like if I hadn't operated that show, like it just would have been.
Was it handheld or any kind of a rig like a movie?
No, it was like it was mainly studio actually, but there was some handheld in it, all right. But it's just that thing of like yeah, being right sort of involved with the action and sort of in tune with the actors in such a way that, like, you know, you can plan the shot, whatever, but then on the day you're going to react to what's happening around you. And so it's just being able to sort of pick up on that, you know.
There's a question there in the Q&A from someone. Any advice for new directors or writers for preparation and for working and communicating effectively with DOPs? I think that's kind of interesting, and you can forget that I'm a director at the moment, but like there are a bunch of mistakes that I've made as a director that I think, well, I should have communicated differently with the DOP. What is the advice that you guys would give to a director, a young director starting out? Carl?
I think I love getting references from directors, whereas I don't give them. I love getting them from other directors, how they might see it, or, you know, these films, or, you know, so like I really ask them, you know, are there films you think, you know, you like the vibe of, and or pictures or that. So like I really like getting visual references and that. And I think as well, it's also being open, because you want to get the best from your DP. So you want to, you know, you've been living with the script for however many years. So you've got predefined notions of how it might be. And then I guess it's just to be open to it when things might, you know, you mightn't have the budget to do what, you know, is in your mind's eye. And the thing is, there's always workarounds into how you can get the same feeling by doing something different. So I think it's being open. I think it's all about, like, the directors I've worked with, you know, they're people who get the best out of other people. I think that's the best trait, you know, whether it's production designer, DP, anybody, that they're there and they're just trying to get the best out of them. And when you feel you've given something to the whole process, that, you know, everybody's invested in it and people are on board. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think that's the obvious thing. But yeah, I like getting references from directors and chatting about it, and yeah, making people invest in your project is key.
Very good. Piers, do you want to add to that?
I think I think the point that Cathal made about not being too married to come with a slightly open mind and to not be to kind of enjoy it, I suppose. And not often if you're carrying your first film, it's I think it's often the least enjoyable film that a director makes because they feel like it's their only chance or something. And I think that it's worth kind of trying to enjoy it as much as possible and kind of and I think that flexibility is very important. But I do think that coming at it your own way is good, and not you know, not having too formed an opinion of how you should approach it. And I think as a DP, I would hopefully be open to a different approach and not be kind of imposing a style upon a director. So I think if you're as a director, I think you should just be kind of doing your own thing and enjoying it. Probably would be my tip.
Kate?
Yeah, I guess it's a collaborative process. So it's you know, it's just kind of communicating, you know, trying to communicate what it is you have in your mind, and whatever way you choose to do that. There's no best way, you know. It's how you communicate, and to sort of trust your, you know, if you've chosen your HODs for the job, that to trust in their expertise and also challenge, but like, you know, just to kind of yeah, I mean, it is an exercise in trust for everyone, I think, in a sense. So you know, you all want you all have the same story in front of you. It's just you might be coming at it slightly different angles, but it's trying to kind of marry those two, or 3 or 4 or 10.
I think certainly from a director's point of view, like the more honest you can be with your DOP, and the less manipulative you can be, the better. Everyone can smell, particularly the more experienced people can smell if, what I mean by manipulation is, instead of let's say the DOP wants to shoot things one way and you want to shoot it another way, and the DOP says, well, it'll take ages to do it your way, but it'll be very fast to do it my way. Far better to have a very honest communication. Say, look, if you do it that way, you know, it's going to look shit or whatever. To me, that openness is really is kind of fundamental, and it becomes the lifeblood actually of the relationship, and getting to that moment where you can really connect. And it's just about being honest.
I think production design is also really important, and it's kind of often overlooked as well in early features, and I think maybe it's assumed that it's expensive, or it's more about, you know, set builds and stuff. But I think it's such a crucial role, and it's kind of often underrepresented and underappreciated. But I think that's something to keep in mind as a first-time director, to really source out a really good production designer and be aware of production design and how powerful that can be, because it's so connected to cinematography, and I don't think you can have a beautiful film without a beautifully designed film. You know, I think it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to add to that. I'm just conscious time-wise because we're supposed to be wrapping up. We started at 11, right? So, I mean, what's left to talk about sort of on the sort of schedule thing before Q&As is just to talk maybe about the differences between kind of modes, you know, like doc versus drama, or TV versus film versus commercial, or that. Did you guys, is there anything that kind of jumps out, or is your approach universal? It doesn't matter what media or format you're working
in? I mean, I think I kind of alluded to it earlier, just the idea of being able to kind of prepare yourself with drama. That's what I'm kind of enjoying a lot at the moment, just because I'm new to drama in a sense. And so I think also Cathal mentioned, you know, and it sort of run through for me, was the idea that, you know, in documentary, you're kind of there with the truth of the moment, but sometimes it doesn't actually kind of ring true for whatever reason, that you can't quite access it because people don't want to reveal the truth of it, and it's sort of it can be quite frustrating. But of course, like, you know, it's their lives, and you have to respect that. But I think with drama, it just means that you can, yeah, you can get in there and shape it, and it's just such a fantastic kind of playground in a way to have all these kind of, you know, tools at your disposal, and sort of off you go, and you know, there's just so many, you know, if you gave the same tools to all three of us, same room and same actors and everything, we'd probably come up with a completely different, you know, approach and look, and I just think that's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Piers, do you have anything to add to that?
No, not really. I think everything is really time pressurized these days. So everything kind of the style and technique of shooting is kind of the same. I think it's quite hard to invest as much in a commercial, say, as it is in a film. So I think that's a slightly different mindset, and not. I think you really have to give yourself to a film, and I think I definitely don't give myself to commercials. You know, it's a different thing. It's an enjoyable process, but it's not. I think it's great to be able to do both, to be honest. I think it's nice to have both options, probably. But I think the approach is the same for everything, really, technically speaking.
And Carl, do you want to talk about kind of, you know, if you're doing sort of the difference of like working on like a big show, say like The Alienist, does that come with its own sort of baggage versus you know, an independent film? So
yeah, like I guess The Alienist last year was certainly the biggest budget I've ever worked with, but like, you know, you still have your restrictions. You know, like I could only have Techno Crane 9 days out of the, you know, 8 weeks for whatever it will be, you know, like, so you've still got restrictions on it, but you have all the toys, you can have everything, but the massive restriction is time. It's, you still don't have any time. Like I could have whatever I wanted, and you just can't have time, and that's it, you know. So I think that's certainly one thing that you need to be aware of, that I need to be quick. Because I remember doing shorts years ago, and I'd be taking so much time over a shot on that. Like, I've never had that time since then. I mean, I think people enjoy making these shorts now if you're starting out, because you'll never have that time again, you know. So like working on The Alienist, it's just a massive thing. You have to be so prepared. Everything has to be pre-lit. Everything has to be tweaked very quickly, and it needs to be right. There's no real, you know, of course I made loads of mistakes, and looking back at it now, I shudder, and I think I should have, you know, you have this thing, I should have done things differently or whatever. But, you know, that at the time, that's what I thought was the best thing to do. So, you know, I have to be happy with it now. But yeah, so I don't know, is that answering your question, Ian?
It is, yeah. And you mentioned earlier that you were quite involved in the grade, obviously. Is that something that, how does that work politically? Is that something that you make a requisite of your contract initially, or do you know what I'm getting at? Like,
I'll tell you exactly. It's an interesting thing, because the grade, no, like there's so many VFX. You know, I worked an awful lot with blue screens, so like it was so important because we were recreating New York in 1900, and it was so important to have a good relationship with VFX. So I can genuinely say I had a great relationship with production designer, VFX supervisor, director, showrunner, like all of those. It was a very collaborative effort. And that went with an effort on all of our parts, you know. So that meant that when I finished in November, like they could have just said goodbye to me. Thank you for your job. Good luck. But they asked me, listen, will you still stay involved? And I did. So all through lockdown, I think I graded 2. So I went into Windmill. They sent over a box from LA. So the colorist was in LA. He was grading, and I saw it on a calibrated monitor in Windmill Lane on my own through the night. So I did like 4 or 5 sessions of that. So, and it was luckily because the way I lit it, there's only one way to grade it. And he was kind of forcing Juan. He was kind of not forcing it. He was putting his own spin on it, and it just wasn't working. So I was so delighted that I was able to be involved in it and get it to that level. But then after that, when lockdown happened, I was being sent like 60 gig files. So I was kept in the process. Like, I know this is irrelevant and it's kind of dirty to be talking about money. Like, I didn't charge for that. I wasn't even involved. Like, I didn't even say, oh, I'm charging for the grading or anything like that. I was sending emails to the producers saying, listen, thank you so much for having me involved in this, for keeping me involved. It was costing them time and money to keep me involved. But like, I was so appreciative of the fact, because equally they could have just said, thanks for your job, see you now, good luck. And then the next thing I see it being broadcast, and, you know, so I
think it's a really, you know, having a relationship with the colorist is really important. Just from a self-preservation point of view, I've had two separate experiences with colorists, not in Ireland, but where they told me that the DOP had drastically underexposed the entire film, and I was like, this can't be. But I had at every turn seen the log, and it turned out that this guy didn't know what he was doing, you know, and you are at the mercy of a guy like that sometimes. So it is worth, not just from the point of view of having a relationship so that you understand, so that you can kind of be involved, but also that you know whether it's in competent hands. And most of the time, of course, if it's a big show, it will be, but you know.
But still, it can equally go a different direction. And
there's a lot of charlatans out there.
Yeah, but it was like, I was so grateful, the idea that they would keep me involved. So that's it, you know, and that's a political thing. That was just because there were good relationships and good vibes. Anyway.
Kate or Piers, did you guys have anything to add to that with respect to sort of grading process? Or
I just think I think we spoke about it earlier, really, but I think it's a really powerful tool to make kind of just to complete it and do kind of finishing touches. But I don't see it as a place to kind of totally play around with things and change things. It just seems weird to spend so much time prepping a film and shooting it, and then spend a week in the last kind of final week change things dramatically. So I guess that's also, as a DP, you're quite protective of your work, and it's it's quite daunting. I've had good and bad experiences, but generally good, and often it's just a matter of how much time it takes for it to work out the way you want.
I mean, like Piers, I completely agree with you. And when I say I'm grading, it's pretty much protecting the intent I had at the start, that somebody else is putting a look on top of it. So I completely agree with you. But that's, for me, it's not to play around with things. It's trying to protect what I had, because often the look that you create, it's thrown in the bin. They look at log and they start from afresh and they do what they want, because it's their creative process as well, whereas you need to protect. So
But at the same time, talking about like in film and stuff, I think that with digital, you kind of need to be fairly aggressive with the grade, and oftentimes it's not that they're being overly aggressive in post, it's that they're actually not really going far enough, I think, and that's important as well. Like, I did one job where I came on, this was quite a while ago, and they shot some B-roll, or they shot apart like a few scenes the previous year or something before going into it, and the director was showing me the scenes, and they were in log, and he was like, "What do you think of the look?" And it was this grey kind of washed out thing, and I was really panicking. And luckily, you know, the next year, whenever we finished grading it, we did it and we graded it kind of nicely and properly. But yeah, I think that you have to be. It's not necessarily about it being interfered with too much. Sometimes it's about it not being given enough kind of bite and a look as well. So it's it's a difficult time. It's a difficult time. Good.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a tendency sometimes to kind of level things out, like to such an extent that you kind of take out the life of a scene, you know.
That's really good enough.
And I think like that is sort of the base mechanism of a grader, you know, because that's what they're trying to do, is to kind of give a cohesion. But sometimes it ends up kind of, it's very easy to slip. You know, you can do a whole day of grading, and then at the end, you know, the next morning you're like, wow, where did we go with that scene? You know, it's just like.
I'd usually find that, like, if I could finish a feature with, if it's a director I've worked with before, I can grade a film in about 3 days rather than, usually they give you like 2 weeks, but I usually find that you can have most of the work done quite quickly. And it's not, as you say, it's not overcorrected and it's not sometimes you can kind of overdo things quite easily, I think.
I think a good note as well is like that, you know, as a DOP, as an aspiring DOP or an aspiring director, to get familiar with the process. I mean, you can download DaVinci for free. You can get familiar with the process of what you can do to rushes. One pitfall, which is kind of like the opposite to where you guys are coming from, which is to sort of impose the look, is the other sort of set and someone saying, oh, we can fix this in the grade. And you get into the grade and you realize you can't. And, you know, so it's almost like you need to be aware of the limitations and the sort of potential of a grading suite as well. And they're all different, and all colorists are different as well, you know. So yeah, I think the full gamut of things to watch out for are relevant there for sure. Did you guys have anything else to add? I was going to move into, there's some questions in a Q&A. We might go a little bit over, but I don't think anyone will mind. Will I just jump in? There's only a few, but if anyone else has any questions, if you want to drop them in the Q&A panel there, and I'll try and get through them. So the first question is, could the panel talk about the use of symbolism in their work, whether that be framing, camera movement, lighting, etc.? Does it always come from the director, and does that dynamic change when you get on set? It's a long one.
I mean, I think that's sort of like touching on what we were talking about, you know, just reading the script and trying to figure out what the tone or the drive of it is, and the subtext and all that stuff. And I mean, I went to a talk recently with Pavel Pawlikowski, and he was saying that, like, you know, he has a number of times sort of set up a scene, you know, spent, you know, maybe 2 hours prepping a scene, and then they turn over the camera and he's like, oh no, it's not working. Like, he just knows, kind of gut feeling, that it's just nowhere near what it was supposed to be. And he would just turn to the whole crew and say, look, okay, we're not going to continue with the scene. And I think, like, having that, I'm not suggesting that that's the approach you take, but I think always kind of checking in with your true line, like on a script, and sort of like, you know, just on the day, not to be afraid of sort of taking a little bit of an off road, or you know, to go off the main path. And if you,
that's an interesting, because I worked with an actor who worked with Steven Soderbergh, and I kind of said to him, you know, any wisdom, you know, whatever, and he said the same. He actually said the exact same thing, which was that Soderbergh will stand the scene, and if it isn't on its feet really fast, he moves on. And it doesn't matter if, like, this is the point where, you know, you find out that the guy's mother was shot, and he'll just move, and people are like, what? Now the whole movie seems to be turned on its head. And then you'll be in like a location. This was the film about Che Guevara, and he said, like, we were in a jungle in wherever, and you know, we dropped this scene, and it was like an important moment for my character. And then we're back in Miami kind of like 2 months later, and Soderbergh came up to him and said, you know, here, maybe you say that thing about your great. And so he's letting, because one of the things I always think that happens on a set is, like, bad scenes that have no business being in a piece of drama or anything, are very difficult to light, very difficult to shoot, very difficult to act. And it's that ability to listen to what's the scene is actually telling you, I shouldn't be here, you know, and not getting kind of bogged down into, we're here, we plan to shoot it, so we should, is, you know, that's a real, on TV, that's maybe not something that you can do without getting fired, but it's,
I mean, I think probably, sorry, just in the first couple of days when you start out on a film or a series or whatever it is, that you're just very tuned up to, you know, is everything that we talked about and planned, is that actually working? So like just to check back over rushes and sit down with the director. I mean, I think that whole tradition of projecting rushes at the end of the day, we've kind of lost something from that formality of sort of assessing, you know, what was working, what wasn't.
Yeah, for sure.
Because even in the moment when you're filming, you might think, oh yeah, wow, that was amazing. And then you sit down later and it's like, no, it's not there.
I might just jump to the next question as a technical question. If you're shooting in a sports stadium at night, can the stadium's floodlights be used to light the scene, provided that they do not flicker on camera?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be green, but you can dial the green out. So then if you're using other lights, you might need to add a bit of green in. I mean, I did a thing with for Handsome Devil, and we used the stadium's lights, but I had to take the green out of the camera and then add green into different lights I might use, so that it would all be the same sort of thing. I mean, you know, you'd have to go and test and see what it looks like, but that'd be generally the way.
So it effectively defines a sort of a white balance for the whole scene.
Yeah, I guess if that's the main thing, or if it's a background, or yeah. Or else you embrace the green, you love it. It's colour.
I think testing is, we didn't really talk about that, but that's huge, you know, just to try and get as much of the kind of ambiguity out of things.
Very good. So the next question is, what's your process of working with actors? I mean, you kind of have answered this, but is there something that stands out for you guys in terms of piece of wisdom of working with actors, or maybe even working with stars is another, you know, it's a slight difference sometimes, or something like a sex scene, you know, Kate, obviously normal people, that's a factor, but you know, is there anything you guys wanted to say about that?
You just need to give them space, and I mean, it must be the most difficult job on a set, an actor. So I think I totally understand all their requirements and all their space requirements and all their, you know, it's all about just kind of giving them the world that they need, and not trying to be as undistracting as possible.
I think if actors trust you, I think that's a massive thing. Whether, you know, and then you get the best out of them, and they get the best out of you. I think it's again, it's a collaborative process. So, but I think a big thing is if actors trust you and they're not worried about, you know, how you're going to make them look. That's certainly the first thing. You don't want people thinking, God, I don't like the way that's lit. So, yeah, I would certainly think trust in actors, in your ability to, you know, light the scene the way it should be lit is very important.
Very good. So next question, which cinematographer internationally has impressed you most and why? Anyone want to jump off?
So many. my current phase is probably Bradford Young. Yeah, I just quite like what he's up to. I mean, I think you go through, well, I definitely go through kind of phases of being drawn to certain DPs. Maybe you just kind of discover them through prep as well in a film. But yeah, I think I mean, Roger Deakins obviously is a bit of a hero. I mean, he's always kind of good to go to, I think, in terms of economy, like storytelling economy. I just think he's, you know, the blocking and everything is just, it's so good. And yeah.
What are you guys taken by so like for me, you know, there are DOPs, particularly like say in the commercial world, where you can appreciate their aesthetic. And then there are other DOPs where it's not really about their technical aesthetic, it's about a texture. Is that something, like Sean Bobbitt is a very good example where, you know, it's not that he's necessarily breaking the mold in terms of an aesthetic, but there's something about the way his work feels that's really unique. Is that something that you're sort of inspired by, or is it purely aesthetics?
It's a great reference for texture, but there's a series I saw recently called I Know This Much Is True. And there's a guy, it was Derek Keansans who did The Place Beyond the Pines, actually.
Pines, yeah.
It's actually not dissimilar to Sean Baba's kind of work in that. The cinematographer is a guy called Jody Lee Lights. And it's amazing. It's shot on 35mm, but they cropped in on it, so it's kind of like quite textured kind of grain 35. And just in terms of blocking and filming style, it's really unusual and kind of textural, and yeah, that's something that drew me quite recently and stood out, because there's a lot of things now. Quite hard to see something that looks quite different now. I mean, the cameras are all the same, the lenses are mostly the same, and it's unusual to get that variety in texture, especially.
Very good. Carl, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's so many. I'm really enjoying the podcast, the Team Deacons podcast. I think they're brilliant, because I just Linus Sandgren was on or I was listening to him yesterday, and I'm really enjoying listening to those and their process. But yeah, I recently finished Ozark, and I really liked the look of that. That was, again, it was something different. It was consistent, and I thought it was clever in the way they shot it. So, I mean, I think there's so much out there. It's trying to get time to watch it is the thing.
Very good.
Yeah.
I'm just looking. I'm sorry, I'm getting notes from thing. There's a question for me. I'll answer that offline. For a film with lots of driving, do you prefer a studio with rear projection or to be on the road?
I think it's very time consuming to shoot it for real, but it's quite hard to make it look realistic in studio. Probably the answer. I mean, for nighttime scenes, it's you can get away with quite a lot in the studio. But I think if it's something that needs convincing driving, or like a chase or something, I think it's much better to do it for real.
Did you ever consider for Rosie to shoot some of that in studio or with back projection?
No, I don't think so. I think we just wanted it to be real. Yeah, I think I'd hate to do back projection. I did on the Aliens last year. We did carriage sequences, and I did them on blue screen, but it was more the sense of, we lacked the set so we did it, and I tried to get light coming in and light changing and all of that. But in terms of cars, I would never do rear projection if I had the choice. I'd always
I don't know if you guys are familiar with, there's this new
LED.
It's an LED TV screen effectively that wraps around the car, and you can move the camera, and it's it's completely, all the parallax is taken care of. They used it, I think, for the space scenes in the guy who did Whiplash.
First man.
Yeah, and I think, to me, that's exciting. I think the whole rear projection thing, either you embrace it as rear projection, like Pulp Fiction, The Taxi, that's cool, or you do it for real, or you go. One of the things that tends to be always make an arse of is, like, you see too much detail outside. In other words, you kind of light the scene for outside because there's blue screen there, but you would never do that if you were outside. You would just let it blow out or whatever. So there's an aspect of that that's relevant. They're telling me that I can wrap up here. I'm sorry if there's any questions that I didn't get to. I don't know, do you guys have anything else that you wanted to add? I think it's been totally informative and insightful for me anyway, and enjoyable. I don't know, is there anything else that you guys wanted to add?
No, just thanks, man. It was great to be on. I mean, I think, starting, like, I feel going to set, and I know this is probably stupid, like, but I feel going to set that I'm a trainee, because I just absolutely wonder at the whole thing. And then I realize, God, I'm the oldest person there, maybe sometimes, but like, I never stop at the wonder of being on set and shooting. And I'm very grateful for that. That's certainly one thing for me. It's kind of, I find it all a bit mad.
It's good to know you're not disillusioned after.
No.
That's important.
Thanks for having us today.
You've been amazing, so thank you very much.
Guys, if I can just jump in there, I'd just like to echo that. Thank you all so much. That was hugely informative. I think I've taken about 23 pages of notes from that. Thank you so much to Ian. Like, that was incredibly well thought out and structured, and I think the people viewing at home, and there was an awful lot of them, really would have got something out of that. So if everyone viewing at home, if you just want to give a very sad, lonely, socially isolated hula bus for Kate, Cathal, Piers and Ian, that was fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. Just for those of you at home, I'd just like to remind you that we have another one in this series of IFTA Skills in Focus on documentary coming up on Friday at 2 p.m. And for that, we're delighted to have a panel of Dan Reed, the Emmy-winning and BAFTA-winning director of Leaving Neverland, Michael Jackson and me. We have Emer Reynolds, who has worked, of course, a lot with Kate, who was Emmy-winning for The Farthest. And we have Brendan Byrne, he's a director and producer behind Bobby Sands, Gaza, No Stone Unturned, and Sinead O'Shea, whose debut film, My Mother Brings Her Son to Be Shot, has earned incredible accolades. So please do come back for that on Friday. But just once again, guys, you've been an amazing panel. I think that was hugely informative and the most significant deep dive into cinematography I've seen in Ireland. So just thank you all so much. That was terrific.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Thanks, Amel.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.